They almost never happened. Not the fame. Not the awards. Not the millions of fans across 3 continents who know their faces better than they know their own neighbors. None of it was supposed to go the way it did. And the part that almost nobody knows, the part that changes everything about how you see them, happened long before the cameras ever rolled. So before you think you already know the story of Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu, just wait. Because there are facts buried inside this story that even the most dedicated fans have never come across. And one of them, somewhere in the middle of this, is going to completely reframe how you've been watching them all along. Let's start at the beginning. Not the public beginning, the real one. Barış Arduç was born on August 15, 1987, in Kırklareli, Turkey. A small city near the Bulgarian border. Not exactly the kind of place people associate with future stardom. His family wasn't in entertainment. There were no connections, no silver spoons, no industry doors cracked open for him. What he had was a face that carried every emotion without trying to, and a restlessness that small cities tend to produce in people who were built for bigger stages. He moved to Istanbul to study at Isaac University, where he enrolled in the drama department. And here's the first thing that surprises people: Barış was not an overnight success. He wasn't discovered at a cafe. He wasn't scouted at a party. He spent years doing smaller work, learning his craft, building something that most people only saw the finished version of. The grinding, unglamorous early years of someone who simply refused to stop. His first major television role came in 2012 with the series Fatih Harbay, and it was that role, that specific turning point, that put his name on the map in Turkish television. But even then, it wasn't a straight line. It never is. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Elçin Sangu was born on June 27, 1985, in Istanbul. Unlike Barış, she grew up in the city. Studied architecture at university before completely pivoting to acting, which is the kind of decision that most people's families don't exactly applaud at the dinner table. Architecture to acting. Structure to performance. Logic to emotion. It's a fascinating contradiction, and it says something profound about who she is. She wasn't following a mapped route. She was building her own. Her breakthrough came through the series Kiralık, which ran from 2007 to 2010. That show made her a household name in Turkey. By the time she crossed paths with Barış Arduç professionally, both of them were already established. Both were respected. But what happened when they were actually put together on screen? That was something nobody predicted. The year was 2014. The project was Medcezir, Turkey's adaptation of the American drama The O.C. Barış played the role of Semserifoglu, and Elçin played Zeynep. And if you've ever watched that show, you already know what happened between those two characters on screen. The chemistry was electric. It was the kind of on-screen energy that directors can't manufacture and casting agents spend entire careers hoping to accidentally create. But here's the thing that most fans don't fully appreciate: neither Barış nor Elçin openly talked about what was happening between them during that period. There were no coordinated social media posts. No staged paparazzi photos. No publicist-approved statements. The relationship, if it existed during that time, was remarkably private for two people who were becoming increasingly famous. What we do know, what has been confirmed, is that by 2016, they were publicly a couple. And the Turkish entertainment world, which absolutely loves a good love story, lost its mind. But slow down. Because fact number 4 changes the atmosphere entirely. Before Barış and Elçin were ever a confirmed couple publicly, there were years of rumors and speculation that they were just colleagues. Co-stars. Professionals who worked well together. And Elçin, during interviews in that period, consistently deflected personal questions with a particular grace that made it impossible to tell what was real and what was performance. She has always been deeply private about her emotional life in a way that almost seems at odds with how openly she performs on screen. This is a woman who can cry on cue, make you feel heartbreak through a television screen, and then walk out of an interview without revealing a single personal detail that she didn't choose to give. That level of emotional control is rare. And understanding that about her makes you look at everything she's ever said publicly in a completely different light. Now here's something that genuinely surprises people. Barış Arduç is fluent in Bulgarian. Given that he grew up near the Bulgarian border in Kırklareli, this makes geographical sense, but most of his international fans have absolutely no idea. It's a small detail that humanizes him in a way that his perfectly lit press photos never quite manage. He grew up between two cultures, two languages, two worlds. And some critics who have analyzed his acting have pointed to that cultural duality as something that gives his performances an unusual depth, a sense of being slightly outside every room he enters, observing, feeling the edges of belonging. That's not a bad quality in an actor. That's actually gold. And Elçin carries her own unexpected background. Before acting fully claimed her, she pursued architecture with genuine seriousness. She has spoken in interviews about how that training changed the way she thinks about space, about structure, about how human beings move through environments. She applies that spatial thinking to how she inhabits scenes, where she stands, how she holds her body, what the geometry of a moment communicates before a single word is spoken. That's not a typical answer you get from an actor when you ask about their preparation. That's someone who thinks on a different frequency. But here's where the timeline gets complicated. And this is the part most casual fans completely miss. In 2017, Barış and Elçin starred together again in the series Erkenci Early Bird, and this time the chemistry wasn't just on screen. This time the whole country was watching something that felt less like performance and more like documentation. The show became one of the most watched Turkish series internationally during that period, gaining massive viewership across the Middle East, Latin America, and parts of Europe. The lead characters, Can and Sanam, became cultural touchstones. Fan pages multiplied overnight. People who had never watched a Turkish drama in their lives were suddenly binge-watching episodes at 2 in the morning. And woven into all of that was the reality that the two people playing these fictional lovers were actually in a relationship in real life. Which either makes you feel like the universe has a sense of poetry, or it makes you wonder how two people navigate the emotional complexity of performing love for cameras while also living it privately. That question, that specific psychological tension, has never been fully answered publicly by either of them. And that silence speaks. Here's another fact that most people don't know. Barış Arduç has been open in interviews about his complicated relationship with fame itself. He has described feeling uncomfortable with the loss of anonymity, the way public recognition changes ordinary moments, going to a market, sitting in a cafe, walking through a neighborhood he's known for years. He has talked about the strange grief that comes with no longer being able to simply exist without being perceived. For someone whose entire profession requires being seen, this is a fascinating internal contradiction. He performs in front of millions. And yet he genuinely mourns the privacy that performing cost him. Elçin, on the other hand, has approached fame with what can only be described as architectural precision. She manages her public image the way someone designs a building, intentionally, structurally, with clear decisions about what is visible and what is not. She rarely overshares. She is generous with her warmth but protective of her interior life. She has built a public persona that feels authentic specifically because it has such clear edges. Now here's the part that fans who only started following them recently tend to get wrong. Barış and Elçin officially announced in 2018 that they had ended their relationship. The news hit their fanbase the way these things always do, with grief, denial, and an enormous amount of speculation about what had happened. Social media went into an extended spiral. Comment sections filled with theories. People who had invested emotionally in their love story, both the fictional and the real version, found themselves processing something that felt disproportionately personal. And neither Barış nor Elçin said very much about it at all. What little was communicated was brief, measured, and carefully respectful toward the other person. No blame. No drama. No interviews designed to frame one version of events. In a media landscape that rewards emotional spectacle and feeds off public breakdowns, both of them chose something more difficult, quiet dignity. Which is, depending on how you look at it, either deeply admirable or deeply frustrating if you're someone who wanted answers. What we do know is that both of them continued working. Both continued creating. And the work remained extraordinary. Here's fact number 8, and this one genuinely reshapes the narrative. After the breakup, Barış Arduç went on to star in several projects that critics consider some of his finest work. He wasn't diminished by the personal upheaval. If anything, the performances that followed carried a new weight, a new texture of something lived rather than imagined. Actors talk about the way personal experience eventually finds its way into the work, not deliberately, not as autobiography, but as emotional truth that seeps in through the cracks. Whether that's what happened with Barış after 2018 is speculation. But the quality of his performances after that period is a confirmed fact. Elçin similarly moved forward with projects that demonstrated the full range of what she's capable of. She has continued building a career that doesn't depend on any single relationship or any single role. She has maintained a presence that stands entirely on its own artistic foundation. And then there is something that almost no one outside the Turkish entertainment industry fully understands about both of them, the degree to which they are genuinely respected by the people they work with. Not just as stars, but as professionals. Directors, co-stars, crew members, people who interact with celebrities constantly and are not easily impressed, consistently describe both Barış and Elçin in terms that go beyond talent. They talk about preparation. About generosity on set. About the quality of attention they bring to the work when cameras aren't rolling. That's not something you manufacture. That's character. Here's something else worth sitting with. The international fanbase that Erkenci created, and we're talking about millions of viewers across dozens of countries, developed a parasocial attachment to Barış and Elçin that crossed language barriers, cultural boundaries, and time zones. There are fan communities in Argentina, in Egypt, in Indonesia, in Spain, in Brazil, who dedicated years of emotional energy to following these two people. Who learned Turkish phrases from their dialogue. Who planned trips to Istanbul based on filming locations. Who organized charity events in their names. The scale of that connection is genuinely remarkable. And neither Barış nor Elçin fully anticipated it. In interviews during and after Erkenci, both of them expressed something that sounded like honest surprise at the depth of the international response. They had made something that they were proud of. They hadn't calculated global domination. They had simply done their jobs with care and somehow accidentally reached millions of people who needed exactly what they were offering. There's something almost tender about that. And something that makes you wonder what it feels like to be the accidental answer to so many people's searches for beauty. Now, the final fact, and this is the one that most longtime fans debate the most. The question of what Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu actually mean to each other today, years after the relationship, years after the show, years after the peak of that specific chapter, is something neither of them has resolved publicly. There have been moments, events, industry gatherings, where they have both been present, and the way the media covers those moments tells you everything about the audience's hunger. Every glance gets analyzed. Every absence gets interpreted. Every Instagram comment, or lack of one, becomes evidence for something. But here is what is actually knowable. They made real work together. They created something that outlasted their relationship, something that is still being discovered by new viewers every single day in countries they've never visited. The art survived the personal. The legacy survived the timeline. And in the industry they both inhabit, where very little survives anything, that is an extraordinary outcome. What you choose to do with that information, whether you see it as romantic, or bittersweet, or simply interesting, says more about you than it does about them. Because that's the thing about Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu that most people never quite fully articulate. They have always been, fundamentally, private people who chose public work. Everything you know about them, everything you feel you know, everything that fan pages and interviews and behind-the-scenes footage have given you, it is real, but it is also curated. Not manipulatively. Not dishonestly. But intentionally. With the specific intention of giving you the work and protecting the life. And maybe the most shocking fact of all, after the chemistry, after the love story, after the international fame, after the breakup, after everything, is that both of them seem to have made peace with the version of their story that exists in public. Neither is fighting the narrative. Neither is correcting it aggressively. They have allowed the mythology to exist alongside the reality, without feeling obligated to collapse the distance between the two. That requires a particular kind of confidence. A settled sense of self that celebrity has a tendency to erode in people who don't protect it fiercely. The fact that both Barış and Elçin have maintained that groundedness, have continued making meaningful work, have continued being respected by the people who actually know them, that's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. In an industry built on illusion, they created something real. In a culture that rewards oversharing, they protected what mattered. In a moment when their story could have been reduced to tabloid shorthand, they simply kept working. And 20 years from now, when a new generation of viewers discovers Erkensikas at 2 in the morning and falls completely in love with Can and Sanam without knowing a single thing about what was real between the actors who played them, the story will still land the same way. Still feel the same. Still create the same specific ache of wanting something that beautiful to be real. Because it was real. Somewhere underneath all of it. In ways that neither of them has ever fully explained, and probably never will. And honestly, maybe that's exactly as it should be. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.